I want to bring in Tim Miller. He's a writer at large with The Bulwark and an MSNBC political analyst. He's also the author of Why We Did It, a travelogue from the Republican road to hell. Maria Teresa Kumar is the founding president of Voto Latino and an MSNBC contributor. And I'm personally very grateful to her because she often sits in for me when I have to be on the road. So I appreciate that. Anat Shenker-Osorio is the founder of the progressive research and communications firm ASO Communications, and Jonathan Alter, author and MSNBC political analyst with an institutional memory about politics that is unmatched by anyone else. Thank you to all of you this evening. Tim, let me start with you because I sort of want to try and make sense of how people are thinking about both Arizona, which is sort of ground zero for, hey, let's dismantle democracy, and this Gibbs-Peter Meyer thing in Michigan, which is, like Steve said, confusing to some Democrats because some Democrats want the more extreme Trump-backed Republican to win the primary so that he loses the election. But they'd really, if they had a choice, rather have Peter Meyer. So what are you making of what you've seen so far?
Yeah, and thanks for having me. And I was on the last hour and was maybe a little bit bullish on the democracy candidates in some of these races. We'll see. In the last hour, obviously Gibbs, as Kornacki just talked about, has taken the lead in that race. I'm not so sure that Robeson is in great shape there. Obviously, she's winning. She has a big gap, but we've seen what happens in this election day vote in Michigan. Same thing could happen in Arizona, where Lake could catch up. That's something to keep an eye on. And what you have here in the Michigan race, I think, is a more clear-cut situation. I mean, Meyer might not be on the issues liberals cup of tea, but he voted to impeach the president. He's been very clear about that. He has not at all played footsie with the conspiracies about the election. Gibbs, on the other hand, has. And I think Kornacki's right. Look, I didn't love the strategy of the Democrats to boost Gibbs in this race. We don't know what things will look like in 2024. We don't want a House and a Senate chamber made up of people that would be willing to overturn the election if Donald Trump ran again and lost again. And so I think it's concerning that somebody like Gibbs could get in. Even more concerning would be Kari Lake in Arizona. So, and I do not want to compliment Karen Robeson at all. She has played footsie with this notion about the election, but she is not she's not anything like Kari Lake, who has promised to not certify the next election and who has said she would try to uncertify the 2020 election.
Yeah.
Having Kari Lake in Arizona and Doug Mastriano in Pennsylvania would be a disaster. It would be a threat to the democracy. And so I think that is very interesting to watch. It's kind of bad versus very, very existentially bad in that Arizona race. And so we'll see how it shakes out.
Well, thanks for drawing that line, because Doug Mastriano, who's the Republican nominee for governor in Pennsylvania, went to Arizona to watch how they did this election audit, which, by the way, for all the efforts and all the grift involved, still couldn't find Donald Trump a victory in Arizona. But they're birds of a feather. And if you're concerned about democracy, it's worth watching. Thank you, Tim. Maria Teresa, what's your view on what's happening tonight? I will say Kansas, which we're going to talk about a little more later, has turned out to be interesting on a couple of levels. The turnout, the number of people who turned out to vote in a primary election in Kansas, Kornacki was telling me numbers that sounded like they were almost double what you normally expect.
So you hit the nail on the head, Ali. What's interesting about Kansas is that if you look at the results, it looks like roughly about 300 of the 300,000 Republicans that cast a ballot for the gubernatorial side, you saw an additional roughly 80,000 of them who actually voted for to support the abortion issue in Kansas. And that's huge because it's saying that Republicans are willing to go to the ballot, still vote for the Republican candidate, but support abortion. And one of the reasons why this was put on a primary, why this ballot initiative was put on a primary, was because they weren't expecting turnout. And that was the opposite effect that it had. It actually drove out turnout. The other thing that I'm seeing, which is also interesting, is that Arizona is also seeing record level turnout. Something, again, that we haven't seen, that you normally don't see in the midterms. The last time we saw this height of interest in primaries was in 2018, but that was rare. We've been following the elections at Voto Latino now from the very beginning, since January. People were not paying attention, but this could actually be a strategy for a lot of the progressives and for a lot of the Democrats to own not only the abortion issue, but also recognizing democracy is on the ballot, and they're going to continue turning out. But this is actually, reading those tea leaves, Ali, it's saying that the midterm in November is going to be much closer than we suspected.
So I'm glad if people think democracy is on the ballot. That's always a good discussion and an important discussion to be having on that. But maybe Republicans are watching tonight and saying maybe abortion shouldn't be on the ballot. Maybe we got what we got out of the Supreme Court. We got through 3 Supreme Court justices. Maybe nobody should say the word abortion between now, or no Republican should say the word abortion between now and Election Day, given what we just saw in Kansas, where I don't know how to describe it because the question was placed so weirdly on that referendum. But people who wanted to preserve abortion rights have voted well in disproportionately higher than they have voted typically for Democrats.
That's actually correct. What was interesting. Oh, my apologies.
No worry. I'll get to Anat and then I'll get back to you. Go ahead, Anat.
My apologies, Maria Teresa. I thought he was addressing me. I think that what the common thread here is, and essentially once you open Pandora's box, I would argue you can't put it away. They may not want to talk about abortion, but boy, howdy, are we going to be talking about it? And the through line here between essentially the contest of how much insurrection would you like in your Republican Party, a little or a lot, the through line between that and the abortion issue is freedom. And not for nothing was the No campaign called constitutional freedom, because essentially the argument going down right now is, do you want, in essence, an authoritarian faction that wants to take away your freedoms from the most essential freedom to vote and to decide for ourselves who governs in our name, to the freedom to decide what happens to our bodies, our futures, our families? And that is nothing short of what's on the ballot. And we see in both cases that voters are leery of that, of the taking away of that freedom. And insofar as Democrats make a compelling case that they are here to protect our freedoms, and a compelling case, and there's plenty of evidence available, that Republicans want to take away those freedoms, I think that we have a mobilizing and persuasive message for voters.
Jonathan Alter, we're looking at Missouri, we're looking at Kansas, we're looking at Michigan, we're looking at Arizona, we're looking at Washington State. A lot of places tonight, each of which tell a slightly different story. Peter Meijer in Michigan is one of 3 candidates tonight, 3 Republicans up for primary election who voted to impeach Donald Trump. Tim Miller makes the point, they're not liberals. These are not people who are not conservatives. They just did something there that may cost them in their election up against Trump candidates. Kansas has got the abortion issue. Arizona's got the election legitimacy issue. Michigan's got all sorts of things going on. Taken nationally, with all of your experience, what do you make of what you've seen so far tonight?
Ali, I think the big news is choice quake. This issue is going to be huge in the election. If in a state like Kansas, those who favor abortion rights came out in such numbers and won by way more than expected. I mean, by some polls, they were expected to lose narrowly. It was a blowout. And this sends a big message nationally to Democrats. Now, the red wave theory was already in tatters in the last couple of weeks. If you look closely at the polling data, it's clearly going to be a very competitive election in the fall. There is no red wave. That's history. But what we don't know is how much of a role abortion is going to play. And tonight was an indication that it could play a very large role, even if it's put pretty far down on the list of issues that voters say they care about, well below the economy. It relates in a major way to turnout. And if the turnout is closer to 2018, when the Democrats did really well, than to 2014, the midterm before that, when Democrats did poorly, then Democrats will do much better than expected again. And it's even possible that this could be a 2002 type election. And by that, I mean 2002 and 1934 are the only 2 elections, midterm elections in the last 100 years where the party controlling the White House after its first 2 years gained seats. And so it is possible, and now it's considered likely, that the Democrats will gain seats in the Senate, and it is increasingly possible that they will hold the House. In 2002, just to remind people, the economy was not very good, but 9/11 pushed the economy into a secondary category, and it became kind of a 9/11 election, which worked to President Bush's advantage. This, even though he wasn't all that, popular on the economy, this could be a similar kind of thing where the voting is for Congress is decoupled from Biden's low approval ratings, and you see a Democratic victory.